Is it live? Alright, well I think I'm live now. Alright. So hey, what's up Facebook? This is Eamon Hartnett coming at you, I believe live. It looks like it is. On April 30th, 2024. Something that popped up for me on Facebook Memories yesterday was this essay that I wrote, I guess a little bit over a year ago. I was listening at the time to C.S. Lewis's book, Miracles, on Audible, and as I was listening, it was inspiring me to write this short little 6-page essay in response. So I thought it would be, I reread it, and I thought, you know, a little over a year later, it still stands up, so I thought it would be cool to kind of put together a video version of it. So yeah, let's just dive right in. Secular Perspectives on Higher Powers, Eamon Hartnett, April 2023. Even from a purely secular perspective, we maybe ought to be open to the possibility that miracles are real and that prayer and ritual can actually work in ways that are much closer to how religious and superstitious people think they work than to what most atheists have traditionally thought. C.S. Lewis wrote, "I use the word miracle to mean an interference with nature by supernatural power." Lewis distinguishes nature and supernature here by saying, "The naturalist believes that a great process of becoming exists on its own in space and time, and that nothing else exists. This single total reality he calls nature, and if we decide that nature is not the only thing there is, then we cannot say in advance whether she is safe from miracles or not. There are things outside her, but we do not yet know whether they can get in. The gates may be barred, or they may not. But if naturalism is true, then we do know in advance that miracles are impossible. Nothing can come into nature from the outside because there is nothing outside to come in, nature being everything." I don't think there are many atheists today who would insist that our observable universe must certainly be all that exists. Before we get into the multiverse or time travel, let's think for a minute about simulation theory. If technology keeps improving for the next few centuries at the same pace it's been improving for the past few centuries, or even half that pace, it seems very likely that our descendants will, at least within a few hundred years, if not much sooner, create computer simulation worlds with many conscious minds inside them. Not just with real human bodies outside plugged into the matrix, but instead more like what we've seen in Black Mirror and even Westworld, with the conscious minds in the simulated worlds not always based on any particular real person outside, living or dead. Our universe is apparently 13.7 billion years old. Our solar system and Earth are 4.5 billion. Life on Earth is 3.7. There's no reason that microbes, much like those that evolved, apparently by accident of nature, on Earth 3.7 billion years ago, couldn't have also evolved by accident of nature elsewhere in our observable universe over 13 billion years ago. Our observable universe could easily have already contained many thousands of species that reached our current level of technology 10 billion years ago. For many of them, it's likely that they and their technology have kept evolving since, and that the number of computer simulation worlds they've built, including simulations within simulations, has kept growing astronomically. As some people much smarter than me have argued, this means that the chance that our own observable world is not a simulation is nearly zero. I'm just double checking again. It says I'm live, so I'm gonna. I'll be disappointed if I waste an hour and it wasn't actually live. I'm pretty sure it is. All right. The chance that the sun will rise in the east tomorrow is extremely high. If our universe is not a simulation, if all the matter we see through our telescopes and microscopes is really there, and there by accident, just as it appears to be, and if there are no aliens, time or multiverse travelers, etc. out there to interfere, then, as far as I'm concerned, the likelihood that the sun will rise in the east tomorrow is 99.99999% I think they call that approaching 100 asymptotically, if I remember my high school math correctly. That's the word for what I was going for there. If we're in a simulation, it seems entirely plausible that someone controlling the simulation from outside could easily flip a switch to make the sun rise in the west tomorrow, or even from due north. The odds that we're in a simulation may in fact be higher than the odds that the sun will rise in the east tomorrow. If we're in a simulation, it's plausible that some people observing it and sending inputs into it from outside can also hear our thoughts and prayers and have an account of all the times we've been bad or good from their point of view, just as well as we tell children Santa Claus does. In his book Miracles, which I quoted above and which I started recently but haven't finished yet, I did go on to finish it, by the way. I forget exactly how far into it I was when I started writing this essay, but I did I did finish it soon after finishing this essay. His book Miracles, Lewis notes early on I propose for the rest of this book to treat only that form of supernaturalism which believes in one God, partly because polytheism is not likely to be a live issue for most of my readers, and partly because those who believed in many gods very seldom, in fact, regarded their gods as creators of the universe and the self-existent. He also notes that in acknowledging the probabilistic nature of quantum physics, we have really admitted something other than nature. Lewis refers to quantum input as subnatural, as opposed to the supernatural input that for him comes into nature more directly from the Christian God. Of course, we don't have to be bound by what Lewis did, and if we're maintaining a secular perspective here, as I'm claiming, then of course we aren't bound by that. If our observable universe is a computer simulation, it might be like a video game. Video game, alright. It might be like a video game with, say, 12 or 13 players all playing simultaneously. They're each their own kind of Santa Claus or God from our point of view. They each have their own subjective idea of good and bad human behavior. One God player might attempt to reward us simulated folks for thoughts and actions that another God player instead seeks to punish us for. For Lewis, the gods of Greece were not really supernatural in the strict sense which I am giving to the word. They were products of the total system of things and included within it. And different solar systems or different galaxies will be parts of the same nature as our own sun. It might be at least somewhat interesting to learn whether C.S. Lewis would consider higher level simulation players, time travelers, multiverse travelers to be supernatural beings in his precise terminology. However, that's probably also not a terribly important point. And the basic conceptual idea of feeding input from outside into a more relatively closed system would seem to plausibly apply to higher level simulation players, time and multiverse travelers, and even some in-universe aliens. Just going to set one notification so I can see that it's still telling me live. Alright, cool. I think I'm still live. Alright. Alright. So let's say we're in a simulation with 12 or 13 God players in the next level higher up world. One God player may seek to reward those of us who are religiously Christian and punish those who aren't. Another may seek to reward those of us who really love the show Seinfeld and punish those who dislike that show. They're competing with each other for simulated resources just as we are. They have the ability to perform what are, from our perspective, supernatural miracles, but those abilities are also limited and in conflict with each other, much like in a multiplayer video game. Many of the possibilities are more similar to the polytheism Lewis apparently didn't want to talk with him much about. Attempts at prayer to a God who shares your values may have positive mental health effects even if there's no God actually listening, and traditional atheism should have no real problem with that way. But simulation theory opens up something more. If we're in a simulation, then praying to a God who rewards anyone who prays for it hard enough, or who performs precisely the right rituals by rewarding them with a huge number of new social media followers, for example, could in fact plausibly work. Could at least plausibly work. So among these 4 science fiction ideas, aliens, time travelers, multiverse travelers, simulation theory, I do, in fact, personally, as an atheist, think that there's at least a more than 50% chance that at least one of them is real, and a real example of intelligent beings who have godlike power over us in at least the same sense that the ancient Greek gods did. In this way, I am agnostic on higher powers, while still outright rejecting the idea of objective morality that religious Christians like C.S. Lewis believe in. Of those 4 science fiction ideas, simulation theory might be the easiest one to see how, from a purely secular perspective, miracles could be real, and prayer and ritual may actually work in ways that are much closer to how religious and superstitious people think they work than to what most atheists have traditionally thought. And if you've gotten this far, you already know that my strongest argument for simulation theory also includes aliens. So let's move on to just aliens now. Aliens, UFOs, are we alone? Exclaimed 14-year-old Eamon in an 8th grade science project video from 2004. Which you can watch on YouTube, by the way, that's on my YouTube channel. My very layman's understanding is that it's extremely likely that microbes, much like those that evolved, apparently by accident of nature, on Earth 3.7 billion years ago, have also similarly evolved elsewhere in our observable universe, and that our observable universe could easily contain many thousands of species at least that have already reached our current level of technology and far, far beyond. I don't think there are many atheists today who disagree. It's not at all hard to imagine that there are currently aliens watching our planet, covertly spying on us, traveling the galaxy, and reporting information about us and planets like ours out to beings in an enormous number of solar systems and beyond. Even without simulation theory, if these spacefaring aliens have technology at least several centuries more advanced than ours, then it's plausible to imagine that they too have a way to hear our thoughts and prayers and have an account of all the times we've been bad or good from their point of view. And just like there might be 12 or 13 gods intentionally sending competing signals into the simulation, so too might there be 12 or 13 alien civilizations intentionally sending competing signals toward our planet. Some of them might see themselves as like the Federation of Planets from Star Trek. Some of them might think they're more like Darth Vader's evil empire. Maybe one day some aliens will beam a bag of frozen broccoli into your freezer, which you have zero recollection of ever buying because they liked your turkey that day. Who knows? C.S. Lewis probably basically anticipated all of this, and that's why he tried to exclude space aliens from his definition of supernatural miracles. Have we done enough on just aliens now? I feel like we probably have. Alright. So let's move on to time and multiverse travelers now, if we can. Maybe this morning you thought to yourself, should I drink coffee or tea this morning? Or a 7 p.m. beer? Let's see. Alright, yeah, never mind. Maybe this morning you thought to yourself, should I drink coffee or tea this morning? Or should I check Facebook or Instagram first? Maybe there is an infinite multiverse in which all of these combinations of choices became real. My very layman's understanding is that this is a potentially legitimate interpretation of quantum physics that has been a staple of science fiction for quite some time now. There are infinite timelines springing from the moment you woke up this morning. In an infinite number of them, you drank coffee and checked Facebook first. In another infinite number of them, you drank tea and checked Instagram first, etc. In an infinite number of universes, humans invented agriculture 12,000 years ago, and a greater infinite number of universes sprung off from that. In some of them, humans walked on the moon and made iPhones with Netflix in what we would call the 1800s. In some of them, they didn't get there until the 2200s. In an infinite multiverse, there could also be infinite coexisting timelines with very different laws of physics. We can't rule out the possibility that there are some worlds that are flat, like the world of Narnia is. Is it possible that some people have already been like members of Lucy Pevensy's family, or like members of Rick Sanchez's family, and traveled to multiple such worlds throughout such a multiverse? Certainly that is possible. And if we're fine with the idea that spacefaring aliens with technology, at least several centuries more advanced than ours, may well have a way to hear our thoughts and prayers and have an account of all the times we've been bad or good from their point of view, then of course people who have stepped through a wardrobe into a world where people walked on the moon a couple hundred years earlier may already have such technology here now as well, all without literal time travel. And of course, if there are actual time travelers. If there are actual time travelers, which there certainly could be one day, they could bring technology from our future to our past and present as well, and maybe have already done so on our present timeline. So yes, aliens, time travel, multiverse travel, and simulation theory are all examples of how, from a purely secular perspective, miracles could be real and prayer and ritual may work in ways that are much closer to how religious and superstitious people think they work than to what most atheists have traditionally thought. If you say a prayer for world peace or for a job promotion, various competing space aliens, time and multiverse travelers, and higher-level simulation folks may all be listening and may have the abilities to respond in ways that could, from our perspective, legitimately and meaningfully be called supernatural miracles. Religious Christians like C.S. Lewis might still claim that they have faith in one monotheistic God overseeing all of this. Lewis wrote, "The difference between the two views might be expressed by saying that naturalism gives us a democratic, supernaturalism a monarchical picture of reality. Religious monotheists are certainly capable of defining their terms such that even if the cosmos is an infinite multiverse, with infinite timelines created both at the random quantum level and by deliberate time travel, containing infinite computer simulated worlds and alien civilizations, there is just one God outside all of that, the only one true supernatural cosmic emperor." Personally, I still see the atheistic argument that modern science has left nothing for a God to have done as far more compelling and persuasive. Modern science has already provided us with a persuasive narrative for how life as we know it could have come about by accident of physical material nature. There are no holes left to fill in about which we could reasonably say that an intelligent higher power seems like a likely explanation. But let's say we buy the arguments that the chance that our own observable world is not a simulation is nearly zero, that our universe contains and long has contained an enormous number of alien civilizations, at least as technologically advanced as our own, and that there are infinite timelines created at least by natural quantum randomness and perhaps by deliberate time travel as well. Was there originally just one Big Bang? Maybe, we don't know. But maybe the accidental multiverse began immediately after a single Big Bang, and then a few billion years later, the first deliberate time travel and simulated worlds began. We don't need a person to be outside that Big Bang. And if there is a person who caused a particular Big Bang, or even who caused the earliest observable Big Bang, then what world did that person come from? At this level, Lewis would likely still call me a naturalist who believes in a closed cosmos, opposed to his precise definition of supernaturalism. There could be an enormous chicken and egg sequence of worlds and world creators. But if one of those things came first, which is more likely? We already have an understandable narrative for how a previously lifeless universe could accidentally give rise to the life on Earth we know. The suggestion that there could have been a person outside the first world who didn't come from any particular world is the harder one to grasp, based on all we presently know and have seen, and that hypothesis doesn't seem to actually answer any questions that still need answering from an intellectual point of view. Occam's razor would seem to suggest then, notification came on my phone. Alright, Occam's razor would seem to suggest then that there were accidental lifeless worlds before there were, I will say this clearly. Occam's razor would seem to suggest then that there were accidental lifeless worlds before there were people making delivered worlds. As I've said, there are at least 4 science fiction ideas that add up to make me agnostic on higher powers, but I am not agnostic on objective morality. So far in this essay, I have used the refrain, "Here are thoughts and prayers," and have an account of all the times we've been bad or good from their point of view, 3 and now 4 times. The academic philosophical distinction between objective and subjective morality is what I've had in mind each time I type bad or good from their point of view. Let's say there are 13 directly higher level simulation players sending competing signals into our local simulation, 13 space alien civilizations sending competing signals at our planet, 13 families of multiverse travelers, and 13 small friend groups of time travelers, feeding competing signals into our local timeline. This could mean that there are at least 52, that is 13 times 4, or even, in some sense, 28,561, which is 13 raised to 4, competing subjective moralities actively operating at a supernatural level on our present version of Earth right now. Now, I do remember when I wrote this a little over a year ago, I based those numbers, the 13 times 4 gets you to 52, I based that on just a normal deck of playing cards, right? That's how playing cards work. 13 times 4 gets you to 52. I was trying to remember, rereading this yesterday, I was trying to remember where I got the or even in some sense 13 raised to 4 part. I think, I might loop back to that later when I finish reading this, but I think it might make sense. But I made up the 13 part creatively here. So the point is, it's an enormous number. It can be an enormous number. All right. So yeah, this could mean that there are at least 52, that is 13 times 4, or even in some sense 28,561, that is 13 raised to 4, competing subjective moralities actively operating at a supernatural level on our present version of Earth right now. Even if there is in fact a singular cosmic monarch above all that, why in the world would we possibly ever think we're doing something good by attempting to be highly obedient to him? I can see, of course, how natural selection, deliberate breeding, and cultural conditioning could conspire to create creatures who value such knee-jerk loyalty. But, if we're being intellectually honest, I've never yet been made aware of any remotely valid argument for actually falling in line with that. The moral arguments for rebelling against such a monarch are far stronger. I've given examples now of how there could easily be, from a purely secular perspective, effectively upwards of 28,000 competing subjective moralities actively operating on our planet right now from what are, from our perspective, supernatural levels. For over a decade now, I've described my own moral philosophy as cosmic utilitarianism. So that's cosmic utilitarianism. That is, I take all existence as an ontologically singular entity called the cosmos, as Carl Sagan did, and seek to increase the joy and reduce the suffering of that entity on net. Sagan's usual idea of our observable physical material universe as a singular entity is at least extremely similar, perhaps even literally conceptually identical, to what Lewis called naturalism. C.S. Lewis died in 1963, and Carl Sagan died in 1996. Neither one of them ever could have seen The Matrix. It's okay for us to grow beyond both of them. Okay, so we're now over 3,000 words into an essay by an alleged atheist. That was a weird choice of words. Yeah, I don't know why Eamon from 1 year ago said alleged there. Self-described maybe is better. Self-proclaimed, I don't know. Okay, so we're now over 3,000 words into an essay by an alleged atheist who's claiming to believe in the possibility of supernatural miracles. So, where do we go from here? Carl Sagan and Andrian ask, how would we explain all this to a dispassionate extraterrestrial observer? What account would we give of our stewardship of the planet Earth? Wondering what aliens watching Earth from above might think of us is, in some ways, conceptually similar to the religious idea of wondering what God might think. Aliens smart enough to travel the galaxy would know exactly what humans are specifically referring to when we say hydrogen atom. Our ideas of, say, liberty or equality, however, may be entirely foreign and barely comprehensible to them. How about joy and suffering? Right, remember Sagan's famous words, the aggregate of our joy and suffering. Well, probably somewhere in between, right? There are varying degrees of vagueness. Joy and suffering are more vague and less precisely measurable than hydrogen atoms, but also less vague and more precisely measurable than liberty or equality. And there is, I've known this for a long time, there's a typo here. I didn't have a proofreader when I wrote this a year ago. I typed then here, like then hydrogen atoms, I said THE and it should be THAN. That's the only mistake like that I'm aware of in this essay. There are varying degrees of vagueness. Joy and suffering are more vague and less precisely measurable than hydrogen atoms, but also less vague and more precisely measurable than liberty or equality. Intellectual honesty may require us to firmly reject the belief in objective morality that religious Christians like C.S. Lewis believe, just as much as it requires us to acknowledge that 2 + 2 = 4. It does not require us to value the attempts to increase joy and to reduce suffering, but it doesn't stop us from choosing to do those things either, if we would like to value something. Benevolent aliens, time and multiverse travelers, and higher-level simulation people would agree with my cosmic utilitarianism, in my opinion. And yes, I am using circular logic to get there, because agreeing with my cosmic utilitarianism is what would make them benevolent, in my opinion. Are you ready for the final paragraph? The fact that there are 8 billion humans alive on our planet right now means that there are 8 billion technically unique subjective moralities operating here at a non-supernatural level. If there are over 50 teams of gods watching from above all that, Earlier in this essay, I said, attempts at prayer to a God who shares your values may have positive mental health effects even if there's no God actually listening, and traditional atheism should have no real problem with that. So where do we land now? How about this? Decide on your own values first, and then sometimes pray for miracles to an alien, time traveler, multiverse traveler, or higher level simulation god who already happens to agree with what you're praying for. You will find the people and gods who want and value similar things to you by being honest and open about what you want and value. Don't try to guess what the most powerful god wants and then just blindly try to follow that. So if you want world peace or a job promotion, should you just pray for it instead of working for it? Obviously not. It's possible that all 4 of those science fiction ideas are real and still that no one is actually listening or cares. But can you be agnostic on the idea that prayer and ritual might help not just on a mental health level, but also on a miraculous supernatural level in ways that are much closer to how religious and superstitious people think they work than to what most atheists have traditionally thought, while still calling yourself an atheist? Yes, I can think of 4 science fiction ideas that add up to allowing you to do that, while maintaining true intellectual honesty. So the thing I was going to come back to was, where did I get that 28,000 from? So if you think about it, so I was trying to remember, when I was rereading this yesterday, where did that number come from? I think it's, like if we say, for example, there's aliens and simulation theory, it's like, you know, and I made up the number 13, but let's say, you know, there are 13 alien civilizations sending competing signals at Earth. One of them is more like the Star Trek Federation, one of them is more like Darth Vader's evil empire. Then above that, there's the 13, you know, simulation player gods too. And so each one of them is sending, right, like player number 1 affects what, you know, the Star Trek Federation is doing, and what the Star Wars people, like the Star Wars, you know, Darth Vader's evil empire people are doing, and you know, et cetera, et cetera. And player number 2 does each of those too. So that's why if there are 2 things together, simulation theory and aliens, it would be 13 times 13. So that's why with 4 of those things, it would be, I think that's where I got 13 raised to 4. But the point, I mean, the point is I made up the number 13. It could be any, but the point is it's an astronomically high number. Once you get to these levels, how many competing subjective moralities there could be at these theoretically supernatural levels. So I think that is all I wanted to say on this video for now. I've now put together this video version of this essay I wrote last year, and I think a year later, I think the essay holds up. Let's hope this video stands the test of time as well.